As Michel said, I'm going to present about a Zoroastrian practice, esoteric practice, which is still performed among the Zoroastrians in India, who are also known as Parsis. In 2019, during my doctoral research, I was in India, in West India, in Gujarat, and I was in Udvada, which is a village which is considered the holiest for the Zoroastrians of India, because it has the most ancient fire temple called Atashberam Iransha. I was there for my fieldwork, and at some point I passed by another small temple of that village, which is called Minocher Pandol Adaram. I was just walking towards my hotel, and there was this gentleman sitting in white. He's a Zoroastrian priest. So I was recording, as you can see. At some point, I stopped the recording and I asked him if he was willing to speak and if I could, approach him and enter. And he said, no, please don't get in. Come back in 3 days. So I was a bit puzzled by this answer. And when I went back to my hotel, I asked the owner of the hotel, who is also a Zoroastrian, Peshotam, what he was doing. Because in the previous days, I was able to speak without any problem with other priests. And he told me that Kobad, who is this gentleman, and his brother, who is also a priest, they were performing the nīrangdīn ceremony, which requires many, there are many requirements in order to perform it successfully. So, as Zoroastrians in India many times expect scholars to know everything about the liturgy, what I did was to go in my hotel room and check in my PDF from the master at SOAS what was the nīrangdīn ceremony. And the best way to probably grasp a bit the articulated Zoroastrian liturgy is a categorization made by Modi, a scholar in the beginning of the 20th century. He suggests that the liturgy can be divided in 5 groups. The first one is social religious ceremonies, which are ceremonies performed for birth, death, marriage. Then we have purificatory ceremonies, which are of 3 kinds, 2 very short and 1 is very long, and they are done to purify people, particularly priests. Then we have initiatory ceremonies to initiate kids into Zoroastrianism or boys into priesthood. Ceremonies to consecrate places like fire temples. And finally, we have the liturgical ceremonies in accordance with the calendar. The nīrangdīn ceremonies, which Kobad was performing in that video, is one of the liturgical ceremonies, is one of the longest, is 19 days, and is also, you will see, very hard to perform. The main objective of the nīrangdīn ceremony is the production of an elixir called nīrang, which is consecrated bull's urine. It is performed by 2 priests, and it lasts 19 days, as I said. I think in 2 weeks, I will fly to India. I will have my fieldwork. So in preparation of the fieldwork, I got in touch with some Parsis to check if there was some priest performing this ritual while I'm there. And one of them, a friend, Kermandar Walla, is a bit scoped out among priests who was going to perform this ceremony, and luckily he found 2 of them performing it in Mumbai in 1 month. And at the end, he also told me that he just found that only 7 priests still perform this ceremony between Gujarat and Mumbai, which is where Parsis are. And when I applied for the fellowship here, at that point, I think I mentioned 12 priests, and a couple of them passed away and others don't perform it anymore. So it's evident how this ceremony is endangered, is an endangered heritage. And something also particular is that the nīrang, which is this bull's urine, is a necessary ritual implement for many other rituals. So once it is not produced anymore, it will affect the performance of other rituals. That's why, for instance, in Iran, we saw a decrease of performance of Zoroastrian liturgy because they don't produce nīrang anymore since the 60s. Today, Parsis are the last Zoroastrian, living Zoroastrians who still perform a big part of the ancient Zoroastrian liturgy. I will, in the next few minutes, I will describe a bit the structure of the ritual, how is it performed, what Parsi priests do during the performance of this ceremony, the meaning they confer to this ceremony in accordance to their cosmology, and also a bit the problem of agency, going a bit into the Zoroastrian ontologies. So regarding the ritual structure, we can describe the nīrangdīn ceremony as a sequence of 3 main ritual units, of which the first one is the barashnum. Barashnum is a purification ceremony. The objective is to purify the 2 priests who are going to perform the nīrangdīn ceremony. It requires, interestingly, the participation of 2 other priests, external priests, who already went through a purification ceremony and hold a ritual power called khub. Why? Because with this khub, they can support all the operations for the purification. And what is interesting is that without people having this ritual power, it's not possible to do many things. So this khub is a living power. There's always someone in the community, some priest in the community holding this ritual power. The barashnum is performed in a small building, which is usually situated in the precinct of a fire temple. It's called barashnum ga. And what happens is that the 2 external priests, they bring some objects which are consecrated. In this case, some of them are nīrang, produced in earlier ceremonies, consecrated water and ashes from a fire, a consecrated fire which is burning in some fire temple, together with other objects like cups of water, and then some sticks and other things. One of them starts preparing the ritual setting in this small building, and then the other one holds a dog by means of a metallic lid. Why a dog? This is a real Zoroastrian dog. It's specialized in barking away demons. And Parsis believe that dogs have a special sight and they can see the demon Nasu, which is the demon of pollution. And so they use out the intervention of dogs when it comes to purification ritual, of death rituals, or similar things. So after they have ritually prepared this building, the 2 candidates, which are going to perform the nīrangdīn ceremony, they are invited in, and they begin to perform a combination of action between, cleaning themselves with sand, water, nīrang, sipping a bit of nīrang, recitation of several prayers, which I'm not going to describe here because there are many. All these things are administered to them through long sticks by the 2 external priests in order to keep distance, because the external priests hold this ritual power and they cannot be contaminated by these 2 candidates. So they need also to keep a spatial distance by everybody in order to keep this power. And they use sticks to support the administration of these things. At a certain point, the dog is let in and the candidates touch the dog. And these operations are repeated several times. So the cleanse of the body, the 2 candidates are naked. The cleanse of the body through these elements and the performance of Avestan, the recitation of Avestan verses is done during the day 1, 18 times, while the dog is let in 13 times. This is just day 1 rituals. So after this, the priests are allowed to rest a bit. And for the 10 following days, they need to keep some rules, like vigil. They need to hold vigil in the night in order to avoid worldly thoughts. If they may have pollution in the night, they need to repeat the barashnum from day 1. They need to keep they have special gloves for eating, cannot use the hands. They have spoons. They also wear special clothes when eating. The food has to be prepared only by Zoroastrians. Usually they are the relatives, and also those relatives have to keep some kind of distance from non-pure persons during these days. They cannot sleep on beds, on chair, on wooden, they sleep on the floor. So there are a set of rules in order to facilitate, let's say, an ascetic experience, a bit of meditative state. That's a bit the idea behind the Barashum. At the end, on the last day, they are required to perform a yasna ceremony. So the yasna ceremony is what Lina very kindly sent out in her email. There were 2 links of a project done recently at SOAS, which document the performance of the yasna ceremony. The yasna ceremony is probably the most known and important ritual unit of the Zoroastrian liturgy. It's basically the recitation of 72 chapters of a liturgical corpus composed in Avestan, and it's a dialogue between Zarathustra and gods. And it's for the performers, it means praise and invocation and offering to the gods. There are a number of implements, which are all these objects. They are not casual, obviously. They are deemed to have spiritual properties, and also they represent the Zoroastrian cosmology in the ritual context, in the ritual space. So they may be connected to specific entities, divinities, or energies, or the spaces in the spiritual dimension. So they represent the Zoroastrian cosmology in the physical world. At the end of the performance of the yasna ceremony, which is done in 2 different settings because the 2 candidates perform it separately, they say that they acquire the khub, which is this ritual power. So once they have acquired the khub on the day 11, they can go to the next phase, which is the geura. The geura implies the recitation in sequence of 6 yasna ceremonies, the performance of 6 yasna ceremonies during 6 days. So it's 1 per day. And the interesting thing is that during a yasna ceremony, we have 2 performers. One is the leading priest, in Gujarati they call it Jyoti, and the other one is the Ratwa, the supporter, let's say, the follower. What they do during these 6 days is to alternate among both of them these 2 roles. So on day 1, one of them is the leader. On day 2, the other one is the supporter, and they exchange these. On the last day, on the 6th day of the yasna performance, they exchange ritually a drone, which is a little bread they have prepared themselves, and they exchange it between themselves. And this exchange marks the acquisition of a new status, which is called Hamkalam. Hamkalam literally means same word, same speech, and in practice means that both priests at some point have an identical ritual power. So the objective of this geura is to level up, to equalize the ritual power between the 2 performers. After that, they can go to the last stage, which is the Videvdad ceremony. It happens, so in the 18th day, they perform the daily prayers, they rest a bit. In the afternoon, they go to the place where the bull is dwelling. So this is called Varasiaji, is a white bull. Usually is in the precinct of the fire temple. Here there's a Zoroastrian lady who just is back from the market where she bought some spinach, I guess, and is feeding the bull. For them, it's an honor to have this opportunity, and it's a way also to get blessings. They consider the bull to be, in the Zoroastrian cosmology, is the first animal created by their god, so it's quite important for them. Probably is also why they use bull's urine instead of other animals. You can see she's very sweet and happy. And in the night, they begin the performance of the Videvdad ceremony. It is performed after midnight. It lasts around 7 hours. It's very long, and there are some rules. They recite by heart Avestan verses, is 49 chapters, if I'm not wrong, and they cannot interrupt it. They can neither go to the toilet. If they make a mistake in the formulation, they need to repeat everything from scratch. So it's very strict, the rule following in the Zoroastrian ceremonies. It's not just the case of the nīrangdīn ceremony, but it's the case in many other rituals. You can see that, for instance, when priests, they are trained since they're children, there's a strong emphasis on reciting the Avestan in the proper way, in the correct way, even if they don't really perhaps go deep into the understanding of the Avestan itself. It becomes an instrument to communicate with their gods and perform rituals rather than a locus of intellectual inquiry. At the end of the performance of the Vidya ceremony, there are two main outputs. One is the nīrang, which is the consecrated bull's urine, and the other one is consecrated water. So in the other bowl, they have water as well. Now, in practice, when I asked them, when I was in India, if you have bull's urine here and nīrang here, how can you know that they are different? And they told me something very interesting. They said that, bull's urine, we use it also to purify our body sometimes. And after 24 hours, it smells. It's full of bacteria. While the nīrang, we store it for 40, 50 years in our temples. And we even sip it when it comes to the performance of ceremonies. And we can really feel that there's no smell, or we don't feel it as a bad thing. So there's also a physical perception of differentiation between ordinary bull's urine and the consecrated bull's urine. Now, if we want to go a bit into the understanding the meaning they confer to this kind of ritual, I think it's important to go a bit into the Zoroastrian cosmology. The first ritual unit, the Barashnum, is a purification ritual. Purification is quite critical in the Zoroastrian cosmology. If we go to the creation of the world, we have Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism, which created both the spiritual and the physical worlds in order to counteract the evil forces. And the evil forces constantly try to challenge the spiritual and physical world by means of pollution. So the demon Nasu is one of the expressions of these evil forces. And there's a strong tension between pollution, purity, good, evil, and we see it along all the Zoroastrian cosmologies, and is also reflected in the rituals, in the purity laws, in the habits, practices Zoroastrians have in daily life. And the main result of this Barashnum is obviously the acquisition of this ritual power, khub, which here I'm describing and trying to define as a purity-enabled ritual power. It's not just a ritual power you can get after a practice, but you need to be pure enough to get it. And it's done through a 11 days purity ceremony. So the element of purity is quite important. The second unit, the Geura. So there is this concept of Hankalam. I really don't know. I will explore when I'm in India what they mean for Hankalam in practice. But I guess that being so difficult, being such a difficult ritual and physically demanding, probably they need to practically have both priests able to be the leader in the last ceremony because it's very long. So this could be one of the practical reasons why they need to have the same ritual power in order that any of them can be the leader in the last ceremony. Another one is also that in the preparation of in this step of the Geura, the Yasna basically is a reenactment of Zoroastrian cosmology. And there is a constant harmonization with the ālāt, the ritual implements, the spirits they invoke, the divinities among them. So the concept of harmonization itself is quite important. It's not just between the two priests during the Geura, but also with all the other actors, objects, animals, which participate in concert in this ritual performance. So I'm here inducing the idea of harmonization, but obviously this is something I have to test during my ethnographic fieldwork. And in the last one, obviously, when they have acquired such a purity-enabled ritual power, while they have harmonized themselves between themselves and the ritual implements and all the elements participating, they are able to achieve the end of the ritual, which is a transformation of bull's urine into something which is different, is very sacred, and is of paramount importance for the performance of the whole Zoroastrian liturgy. When we think about the actors involved in this ritual performance, I need to refer a bit to the classical, let's say, Indo-Iranian framework, triangular framework, according to which rituals are performed. It also applies to Vedic rituals. So scholarship tend to see this ritual performed by three actors. We have the sponsor, who is the person in the community who finances, funds the ritual performance. In the case of the nīrangdīn ceremony, for instance, if I'm not wrong, it costs around $2,000, which is a big sum, it's not cheap. So you need a philanthropist in the village who is keen to support that. The performer, in exchange of this gift, interacts with divinity and offers his mantras and his offerings, and the divinity, in exchange, showers the blessings the sponsor and the whole community. So this pattern produces a gift exchange, as it is said in Indo-Iranian scholarship. However, if we go back to the nīrangdīn ceremony as I described it, we can see there are more than these three actors. So for instance, the first one, we have the elements, water and fire. They represent divinities on earth. And the fire is quite important for Zoroastrians. For instance, priests have reported to me that sometimes during the performance of daily rituals, especially in the night, they receive insights and thoughts from the fire. It's a living entity for them. It's not just a fire as I may understand it. So they are intermediary actors between the divinity and the physical world. And that's why they are always involved in the ritual performance. The second actor, where we have the demon Nasu, the pollution demon, which is in constant tension with divinity and with the good creation. And it's interesting that they use dog to counteract and to bark away this Nasu. And dog himself is used during the purification of the priests. Then dog is not the only animal. We have also the bull, which is quite important in Zoroastrian cosmology, and the bull is the one producing one of the most important ritual implements, which is the nīrang. And nīrang is used by, again, it receives blessing by divinity, and is used by performers for many other rituals. And we have the sponsor, who is usually the person who bought the bull. These kind of albino bulls, white bulls, are not easy to find in India, and they can be quite expensive. And you can see, usually in these villages, there is 1, 2, 3 persons which are wealthy and are interested in supporting Zoroastrian religion and ritual performance, and they take care of funding the operations of the temple, paying a salary to the priests, funding this kind of ceremonies, and even buying a bull when it's necessary. So by doing that, in the case of the nīrangdīn ceremony, probably the sponsor who is funding it is the same who bought the bull, and is the same who is providing, supporting the relatives of the priests in cooking and buying food for 19 days to provide for the ritual performance. So we also have the relatives involved. And this picture, to me, looks a bit different from the triangular framework. It's rather a web of relations between different actors. We have humans, we have non-humans, objects, animals, but all of them, they have a clear role in the ritual performance. And if we analyze them one by one, we have, for instance, priests. They have a strictly performative agency. They cannot invent the script. They cannot be creative or spontaneous. They stick to the instructions. The higher are the possibilities of success for a ritual performance. So they have just a performative type of agency. We have the divinities which shower blessing on the priests themselves, on the animals, on the community. We have the elements which have an intermediary agency, the Nasu, which tries to pollute everything, the dog, which purifies, ritual implements which have a representational agency in the sense that they help the priests to reenact the creation, the Zoroastrian cosmology, into the ritual space. And the khub, I'm here considering the khub as an actor as well. is not just a ritual power that a priest can decide to switch on or off. It's something which is living, is always in the community. There's always some priest holding it and transferring it to other priests. And I don't know, but one may assume that is there since centuries. And this, the kind of power which allows the transformation of nīrang, of bull's urine into nīrang in this case. So I would also consider this as an actor. It's not just an external power. And these all interact in the spiritual world according to Zoroastrian cosmology. And there are many ways, but I would say the main of interaction is the recitation of mantra. It's not just a recitation, but priests are trained to sing the Avestan verses. So it's a song which weave the relations between all these actors in order to harmonize them and achieve their ritual objectives. If we go to the physical world, to the material world, we have the relatives and the sponsor. They are not really much involved into the ritual space. However, they are still actors because they provide money and food, and they enable the performance of the ritual. So if we have a wider perspective about agency, I would say that analyzing the nīrangdīn ceremony performance, we can overcome a bit the triangular framework and speak about a web of relations rather than a triangular ritual framework. And going to the conclusions, I think that the study of the relation between ritual structure, meaning, agency, it's quite important, and I think it has to be done in the context of the cosmology and ontologies of the community we studies. Otherwise, we end up with, outcome or insights which may be easily essentialized. And I say that also when it comes to comparative efforts that we are making here. If we just, for instance, compare the way the Zoroastrians use the dog, for instance, and we find another community in another part of the world which uses the dog in a similar way, it does not mean much if we don't contextualize that action in the context of the purity, the pollution, the demons, etc. So this is just a remark to, I think, to highlight how important it is to contextualize rituals, their meaning, their actions into the cosmologies and ontologies of the communities we study. And trying to answer the question, what do Parsi priests do when they perform this nīrangdīn ceremony? I'm trying here to give an answer which is endowed with the purity-enabled ritual power. Parsi priests transform nature, because they transform this urine into nīrang, through the reenactment of Zoroastrian cosmology. Especially the yasna ceremony is a reenactment of what they think about the creation of the world, operated by harmonizing the actors involved into the ritual performance. That's all from my side, and I would very much welcome, obviously, question, but also some advice, because one of the main limits of performing ethnographic work with Zoroastrians is access to performance. So fire temples, only Zoroastrians can enter fire temples. I cannot enter fire temples. That's one thing. When it comes to some difficult rituals like the nīrangdīn ceremony, where purity is necessary, even Zoroastrians which are not considered pure cannot enter those areas. So it's quite difficult to do ethnography in that context. And obviously I will meet those priests before and after the performance, possibly still keeping distance, because they still may hold this khub power and they don't want to be contaminated by me. But obviously this poses some methodological issues, which I discussed already with some of you, with Alina, Connolly, Raquel, and I have already some ideas, but also would be interesting to get some inputs and some advice from you on this aspect, from the distinguished cohort of anthropologists we have here. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.